Hey, Liron here. If you're struggling with your watercolors not doing what you want them to, you're getting unexpected, inconsistent results, tune in. I'm going to share with you one little trick I like to call timing that will ensure that you get way more consistent results. The paint actually does what you want. And let me show you right out the gate. My wash is quite wet and flowy. So the left side of the eye starts a little, it's a neutral, but it's a cool neutral. White tends to be cool. So I'm going to start by placing it in this very, very watery paint. Can you see how watery this is? And the more water you use, the more time you have. Now, I have no idea what exact result I'm gonna get. That's part of watercolor painting in a way, but with some practice and understanding, your results will get more consistent. I don't know exactly what result I'm gonna get, but I know what kind of level of consistency to expect. And especially the more effort you put into it, you are rewarded for it. So look at this little wash we have here. I'm gonna keep this as straightforward as I can. This is super wet, which is why we have time. I can talk to you now. We can, I can take a sip of my coffee over there, but I won't. So this is what it's about. You can take your time now. Now let's build this as a first wash. Let's continue this. So I'm seeing a bit of blue reflected in the iris of the eye. So let us get that blue in there and treat this like a first wash. So here's the blue from whatever, the sky, whatever it is. I'm gonna use my other brush to blend it a bit. Now, one thing that's interesting and some people have trouble with is, what do I paint in the first wash? They end up with very tacky first washes or confused first washes. To me, this is almost like I paint, the way I paint is I'm ignoring everything that's dark. That's how I think about it almost. If it's dark, I'm ignoring it almost as if it doesn't exist. That's how I like to do it. So I'm ignoring everything that's dark and I'm skipping the highlights. So you can see me leaving some highlights behind like this and like this highlight here where light is reflected. And I paint everything else essentially. That's how I like to do it. Now, here's the thing with watercolor and timing. The more the painting develops, I see a bit of orange here too. The more the painting develops, the more the paint dries, a door opens to painting things with that timing using wet and wet, right? So you're probably familiar with wet and wet technique, and I want to show you a bit of that in a moment. But look at how wet this wash is and how much time we have just to talk, Now, above and below, there's skin tone. So I think we could do a really daring move and connect the two. So here we have a skin tone and above it is a skin tone. So it's almost a no-brainer to extend that first wash. So I'm extending it, right? And I have no idea what exact result I'm gonna get. Again, I don't claim to. What this is about is exploring the very nature of watercolor and wetness and how much you can push it. And take your time with it, actually. So I'm gonna just go ahead and do this. As long as I keep moving my brush, there is gonna be a separation between the two shapes. That's how it works. If I stop and dab and start doing this, there won't be a separation. Now I'm coming back with just mostly water, because what I want is for this part to be a little lighter, like so. There we go. Now you'll notice towards the edges of the shadow, it gets a little more red, and I like that kind of an effect. And where it gets dark, it also gets a little more saturated in some spots. So let's drum up this effect just a bit and see if we can create something interesting here. We'll use our yellow and red to hint that this is, it's an interesting color. It's not just, an orange. There are some nuances here, so I'm varying it up with my colors. Skin tones are very interesting. They are super varied. It doesn't matter what the shallow skin tone is, if it's light, dark, there's so much variety within it. You'll get all sorts of interesting effects with light bouncing off the skin, and just a bunch of cool stuff. So now we're getting to a point where I could almost start developing the eye, because if you look at it in the light, things start to dry. So let's do that. So this right side is a little darker. Now if you're timid, you can start slow. I have my orange, I'm adding a bit of blue to just neutralize it a bit, but you see I can just go ahead and do this and start the process of darkening. If you get the timing right and the consistency of paint right, you will be able to push it and be quite accurate. Okay, now as it gets to the corner, and in fact it may be beneficial to just focus on this corner for a moment here. It gets really, really dark. You can just kind of grab whatever you have and slowly darken and figure out, okay, does this look right? Is this the right color? Is this the right temperature? Should it be cool, warm? But as it gets to the side here, it gets much darker, and we can just work on developing that and kind of let the rest dry for now. It's okay. You'll notice there's a gap here, bit of a gap of lighter paint. So let's preserve, or try to preserve, that gap as we are darkening the right section. And again, a lot of it is hit or miss. I don't know exactly what result I'm gonna get. And then as we get to here, because we're delegating a lot of it to wet and wet, that's why I don't know the exact result I'm gonna get. If I wanted to be a little more controlled, I could, but there's honestly no need to. So this is starting to look right. It's starting to look, oh, that's good. That's a nice kind of level of darkness, and we can almost let it go now. If the paint moved somewhere you don't want to, you clean your brush, you dry it a bit on a paper towel, and you lift. Something like this. But if you'll notice, the top part here should be darker. So we can almost extend that darkness towards the top here, towards this entire section, if you wish to. See? And it should be probably more neutral, so more gray. So let's gray it out a bit. As we, and this is, the timing is off already, and that's fine. Can come back with some damp water, see, and maintain a nice, smooth, relatively smooth transition. In fact, I could go ahead and just do this. Get all the lower parts of this upper eyelid darker. But the thing is, you saw how to complete this wash, we had zero pressure. We just took our time. We just worked at it. We let it develop. We looked at what's going on paper. We just let it, you know, and now it's too dry, and that's, some parts are too dry, and that's fine. But we just let it develop. If you want to get this even more towards a completion, you go ahead and you use some dark paint, extremely dark, towards the edges here, you see? That way you can start really pushing it. You know what? You can push it even further. Let's start painting some of the eyelashes while this is still wet. Some artists are great at using different brushes to get a lot of these down in one go. I'm not one of them. But yeah, you see a lot of the Korean artists especially are wonderful at that. And just generally speaking, all of this bit is darker towards the bottom because there's such thick eyelashes here. So you could kind of just go ahead and darken this categorically. But you see how it starts to develop, a feeling of volume and depth to it. That's a really cool thing, where it starts to feel a little three-dimensional, right? Here, the eyelashes are so so tight together and kind of close to one another that this entire thing, essentially, you could darken it in one swoosh, one fell swoop. You could. Or you could paint them individually. It's really up to your preference. I'm kind of showing you how, because this area was still a little wet, some of these dry really softly, and it contributes to the overall composition of the eye, I think, and it looks really, really good. And this is a very unusual subject matter for me, of course, if you've been watching me for a while. I don't usually paint these kinds of things, so nice surprise, hopefully, for some. Now, I'm going to grab a bit of orange here. I have just a pre-mixed orange, and check it out. I'm going to, because I haven't made the most out of this wash at all earlier, so I'm going to go back, put down paint, smoothen out the edge, and I'm fine, I'm painting over eyelashes, I don't care. And then as we get down to the bottom, I'm gonna make more use of it and start to actually darken it. And again, the more water you use initially, the more time you have. And we've yet to fully explore the area where this matters most, which is inside, again, the eye. You'll see that in a couple of moments. Okay, so that's another thing to look forward to. I think you'll really enjoy it. As we get to the very bottom, I'm just grabbing, really dark. This is lunar black, by the way, if you're curious. Testing it out, seeing if I like it. And like so. And again, the eyelashes here are very narrow and tight together, so you can kind of connect them. But you see how an eye starts to develop. You could, if you want, be more of a perfectionist, just talking about the smaller details, and use a thinner brush just to get some of these to be a little thinner and more kind of thinly defined. There are so many of them, of course, that it's just a matter of doing it, like painting them, and there is no real magic trick to it. Notice how I'm not too scared to paint the final details, even though I know I may end up darkening some areas. That's how I work. Feel free to work differently. Like right now, I'm like, okay, this area should be a little darker. So, and this isn't wet and wet. We're gonna get to wet and wet in the center in a second. But like, okay, so this needs to be darker. So I'm just gonna go ahead and darken it. I have no fear about it. I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. Even though I already painted some of these eyelashes, what you'll find with experience is it really doesn't matter. You can get away with a lot. You can get away with a lot of painting light over dark, dark over light, really pushing the process in different original directions. So again, and the premise of this video is if your paints and your paintings don't do what you expect them to, if you get a lot of unexpected results, this is the secret to it. This is what it's all about. Now, this is a dark bit. I can just go ahead and very boldly start expressing it. I do feel like some parts of it are a little orange. So, and again, we're just letting this some more time to dry. We're gonna get to all the center area. I'm gonna show you how I push it to using wet and wet and using time, mostly time. You'll see we'll pre-wet over existing paint, something I don't show a lot of. But we'll use time to our advantage. This here is a shadow. We can start defining that. Or we could also start defining the orangeness, if you will, of this entire area right here. And I think it would be a cool effect to have a stronger red here in the transition from light to dark. This is sometimes an effect that happens. Just this strong red to show where the apex of color is. I'm gonna grab a bit of carbazole violet, believe it or not, just to neutralize some things around here. Bit of the orange too, kind of mixing whatever I feel like, and going darker on the core of that shadow. And again, you can, with the very heart of it, and I kind of exaggerated how dark it is, if I'm being honest, but I like it. With the very heart of it, you can go with the very strong. I really like this kind of a red combination of Pyrrole Scarlet and almost a quinacridone rose. If you want to lighten it up, again, time's on our side because it's still wet. You could. I almost have a feeling I like it this way, so I'll keep it. Now I think the middle is dry enough, or maybe I'll just do a quick passing over it with the hair dryer, good old hair dryer, just to make sure it is dry enough, because we're gonna start taking care of the middle section here. There are a couple more things. I would like to lighten this up a bit actually, and I would like to darken this up, actually, the right side. It could be darker. I'm trying to keep my darks warm here because it feels like the right thing to do in this particular painting. Like so. Of course this extends, right? It's not in a vacuum, but I kind of painted like this just to simplify things. There's more here, just to say there's more around. Like this goes into a shadow that extends and blah, 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 but it's not that important here. because we're not painting that section. We're focused on this section. Let's paint this iris. I'm gonna pre-wet, adding water, okay? Just good old water. And we'll slowly start pushing it towards what we want. I don't add water to this border because it's meant to be very dark. What I can do is, here's a fun one for you, just paint it dark and see what happens. You go ahead and you paint it dark and you start creating that very nice natural border. I'm adding a bit of yellow to my lunar black just to make a green. It's a fun way of painting a green. Now you could go directly for the end result look you want. So this is really dark, right? So we can just go ahead and place just dark black. You could do that, right? You don't have to, but you could do that. And already it starts to feel, okay, something interesting is going on. There's some depth here. There's some volume to this. And we're going to start defining the center here. I really like the way I would even add orange on top of this. So check this area out here. I love how you can see some of the stronger yellow and a bit of orange here. And again, this is super wet, so we have time. Can you tell? Can you see it in the light? Super wet. That's the point here. The little advice, the little magic trick I'm sharing with you today is time. And if you have time on your side, you can do anything really. So I can see what happens on paper. I can let it develop, right? Okay, so the iris, the center needs to be a little darker. Pupil, is that a pupil or is that an iris? Is that a pupil? I never know what the different parts are called. That's fine. I love the orange feel to the right, so I'm gonna mix some orange and black and kind of start defining the darker center here. And again, because I'm using time, I don't know exactly what I'll get. I'm kind of developing it, okay? So just something to note. You could have, again, more control, less control. You could approach this many different ways. I'm showing you one way. You see? And it really starts to develop. Now, to put things really in perspective, we're going to darken the center even more. Really important. And we can start connecting this wash with some areas in the highlight. Can you see those? So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and start connecting it to the wash we're working on. And what's so cool here is that there are some eyelashes that are kind of reflecting in the eye, so we can get those in as well. These will look really good, and your mind can read them. It's really good at recognizing what it's looking at. This is why we're so visual as humans. And here, this goes right around here, hinting at a window, whatever object, you know, where this person took this photo. So what you'll notice now, the thing we need to take care of is this area that needs to be darker. So let's start cranking it up a bit. So I'm adding a bit more of that lunar black, and let's think in terms of what's the shape of the eye. It's rounded, and we have this upper eyelid, so it's going to cast a shadow. So this entire top part should be in theory darker. Let's add some brown there. This entire area up top, to make it feel rounded and kind of like there's something from the top, it needs to be darker, okay? And I am seeing some hints of darkness around the edges here that I haven't gotten yet. It's all about the timing. How thick the paint is, again, how thick the paint is. It's quite thick, and me painting it over wet paint that is just the right amount of wetness. Can you see the sheen? It's a very gentle sheen. It's not strong. And we're going to continue pushing the center to be a little darker and darker, because that's what's going to make the edges look lighter, right? This edge here, it's really nice. In fact, I could embed some of these, see these little lines there, like we've gotten here? And why is it that I'm able to talk to you and paint this and And we're really working on just the center of the eye for a couple of minutes now, and it's not dry, right? So many of you, you have your paint dry so fast. Why is it that I can do this? And you've been really maybe unsuccessful at that and kind of struggling because it's annoying, you know, you want to add details, but everything just dries on you. Why is it that I'm able to do that? You already know the answer, right? Think about it for a couple of moments. You know the answer. It's very simple. It's time. I have more time. Why do I have more time? You know it. Because from the beginning, I started with much wetter paint that gives me the option to do things and take my time, do things my own pace. I went extreme on how watery I started this wash. Check it out. We're gonna close off that left part of the iris using a bit lighter paint because it goes a little lighter there, and you'll see what a beautiful effect it's gonna create. See, this is the reason I'm able to do that. Now we have this part here of the eye that, once again, shadow up top, right? This area is way more complex than we've painted it, right? We have not pushed it all the way to what it needs to be. We can repeat that same process. I'm gonna come back with some water and kind of pre-wet this area. Now, where are the shadows? I see a shadow up top, a shadow to the side. Let's get rid of this section, clean it up a bit, and mix that same gray-blue and start establishing some shadows here. Let's start gentle. Top, there's a shadow for sure coming from the top. So you see already it feels a little more rounded, just a bit, right? Now there should be some kind of a gradual transition towards this shadow at the edge. Right now there isn't really. So that's something we know we'll need to take care of. Now this area right here, believe it or not, right next to the dark frame of the pupil is darker. This is darker, see? There's a bit of darkness there. There's darkness coming from up top, and there's, I would say, a bit of darkness towards the bottom. And you're seeing how this starts to put it in a more accurate or more completed context. Okay, and this is really important in watercolor. Look, I can still add some details with very thick paint, and it will still blend in almost seamlessly. Context is very important in watercolor. Without the darks, there are no lights. Without the warm colors, there are no cool colors. This is just how we perceive things. A color may seem one temperature in one context, but surrounded by different colors, a very different context, okay? So I think we have reached a critical point of, I kind of like the center, the way it looks. You could push it more. You could make some modifications if you want, but I actually like it almost more than the photo. So I would like to preserve what's good here. So I will probably stop working on it at this point and think, okay, what is still not fully contextualized? And I would say there are some darker spots we're missing, like this, for example. Well, and there's a lot, right? There's a lot here. We've really simplified it. We simplified even the skin tones. The skin tones went way too colorful, but this area right here, it's not dark enough, right? So I can do the exact same thing. I can pre-wet, again, over existing paint. If your paper absolutely sucks, don't do this. But if you have decent paper, you can. But just a heads up, if your paper is terrible, cheap, or if it's pulp paper, which I kind of like for some uses, but it's not really for this kind of a purpose, it's very hard to do this. So test it out before you do it on a painting you care about. But you see, I am going to further darken this corner. And this is going to put the center, the iris, the pupil, all in a much more accurate context, you see? It gives it more of a pop. Now what's interesting is if you want to put the rest of the eye in context, you could probably just, because I went a little too I would say I went a little too red-orange. You could probably just add a bit of green, funny enough. Let's see if a thin glaze does the trick of just a bit of blue and yellow, okay? Let's see what will happen. It should put some things in the right context, but not necessarily. And again, I'm painting over dry, darker paint, and I'm fine with that. Should have used a larger brush here. Now we're just experimenting. As long as the center of the eye looks good, I don't really care about the rest not being perfect. That's the main part for me. But you know, we can try and kind of push the colors to look a little more natural if we want to. Just gray them out a bit, like so. You could repeat it a couple of times, but you see, it gets a bit more natural feeling. But the real, I think, center of attention here is that center of the eye. And the most important idea here is time. Once again, I like to do abstract demos, just tons of water. Can you see the water? There we go. Water gives you time to build things up, to do things slow or fast, however you prefer. You could test out what will happen if I immediately use very thick paint, right? Immediately, I don't gradually push it. There we go. So you get this nice little pattern. What will happen if I come back, and this is something I've been really enjoying lately, come back with a slightly opaque watercolor and just do this. Well, how will the two colors interact with one another? What if I go ahead and kind of feed it with even more dark paint right next to it? The entire key to doing this kind of experimentation, what if we spray some water on it, right? The entire key for this kind of experimentation is wetness and time. Give yourself the time necessary to paint what you want, you know? Here, check it out. Already we got some cool effects here. But you have to give yourself time. If your washes look like this, you're just, you know, you're struggling to, let's add a bit more water. Let's be more charitable. But like, this isn't wet enough. This is gonna be dry in like 10 seconds. And then you try to, you know, connect, and you come back with slightly wetter paint, right? And it's just not gonna end up working for the most part. You wanna give yourself time, and that's my point for today. I do hope you found this useful. I do want to encourage you to check out the frustration-free watercolor course, where I give you a foolproof, step-by-step process for achieving freedom in your watercolors. If you're struggling, if you're rigid, if you're overthinking and obsessing over details, the solution is there. Everything is there from the experience of teaching here on YouTube for years now, for a decade. This course is out a couple of years now, but there's a couple of good years of experience with seeing your exact issues and solving them. I do also want to take a moment to thank from the bottom of my heart everyone who supports me over on Patreon. You keep the lights on to a large extent. It gives me a nice buffer that I can use to produce more and more and more free content. So thank you so much. And if you're not supporting me there and you want to receive credits at the end of the videos, or you want to receive access to a couple of exclusive processes, more to come, be sure to check that out. I will mention, by the way, talking about the courses, there are new lessons, both in the Watercolor Realism course and in the Frustration Free. Both of my courses have new lessons in them. If you haven't checked that out, if you're already a member, log in, you'll see it. It's the last lesson, almost the last lesson. Both of these I sent an email to, but check it out. And if you aren't, now's a good time to hop on aboard the ship. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next vid. Take care.